Hey there, welcome to Iridology Education, and thanks for joining me for this mini class on Anatomy for Iridologists. Would you do me a favor? Would you subscribe to this channel? Would you like this video? And would you share it with a friend? It would really help me out a lot. Thanks. There we go. Welcome and hello. It is so good to have you with me today. I'm excited to see you on this webinar. Again, I would love to know where you're from. It's just fun to see how international this group is. And while you're giving me that, let's just dive right in, shall we? Eye anatomy. That is probably not the hottest topic when we talk about iridology. Everybody wants to know what this marking means and what that marking means and what do we do about this and what do we do about that. But a lot of people forget that it is really important to understand the anatomy of the eye so that we understand what the markings are we're seeing, right? And how they got there and all that good stuff. So that is exactly why we are doing this little mini class on eye anatomy. So important. By way of introduction, my name is Judith Cobb. I am a level 3 certified iridology instructor with IPA. I am one of only 5 level 3 instructors in the world. I got into holistic healing over 4 decades ago because I had some health problems and the medical doctors were not able to help me narrow it down. It was actually a herbalist who was a lay trained herbalist who was able to help me. She was also an iridologist, and that was the beginning of me getting into holistic health as a profession. As I mentioned, I've been in the industry now for over 4 decades. I've self-published several books: Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, The Essential Guide to Nature Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, and The Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Textbook. I've also created and taught courses to go with most of those books, plus additional courses in herbology and in biokinesiology. For a few years, I was a certified prenatal educator, loved doing that, so designed and taught classes around that. And also now currently teach Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, which is an IPA-approved iridology course that includes their level 1 and level 2 curriculum. So stay with me to the end of our workshop today to learn more about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course that will be starting in January. Quick little side note here that I am also affiliated with the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners. I think nutrition is key. I think that it is the foundation of everything we do. I am also a proud member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. I love the work they do. They are an amazing provincial group and just really a lovely bunch of herbalists. Brief little introduction here about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, planting a seed. This is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, naturopaths, and other holistic health professionals, and even mainstream medical professionals who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. So they can stop working unpaid overtime to develop client programs, stop overwhelming their clients with undoable programs, and so they can create programs that will increase client compliance, success, and long-term retention. As we look at some eyes today, you may begin to see how iridology works, even though we're talking about anatomy. It's a really important thing for us to be paying attention to. The goal of the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it. So I'm not just teaching markings, we teach clinical application. So you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition and herbology, so you can confidently create doable client programs in your paid client sessions. Too many holistic health professionals see the client, gather information, then go off on their own and spend 2 to 4 hours of their own time creating protocols that they then often email back to their client. But those 2 to 4 hours are hours they're not getting paid for. They're hours they could be working with another client if they only knew how to assess and create programs right in their sessions while their client is with them. This is what one of my students, recent grads, said. This is, oh, her name didn't show up. This is Joyce Lee. She is a clinical aromatherapist. She says, I'm so excited to have this opportunity. This is what she said before she took my course as we got her enrolled. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to learn new and updated iridology under Judith's expertise and her many years of experience. As a clinical aromatherapist, herbalist, and nutritional consultant, I decided to take an iridology course through another institute. I thought it would be an excellent service to add to my practice. Unfortunately, I quickly realized that I wasn't going to get the knowledge, confidence, and results I wanted to, so I decided to drop it altogether. After finding you, Judith, I'm really looking forward to getting started. When she was 3 weeks into her coursework, this is what she said. I'm learning so much from the course. So far, it has been a real eye-opener. I had no idea how little I actually knew about iridology. No wonder it was never working for me. There are many pieces to each individual's personal puzzle. The challenge is putting it all together and remembering all the little details. I love what I'm learning and appreciate your thorough teaching technique. And after she had graduated, she said this. Judith is a wonderful instructor. She presents the material in this course in a concise, organized way. Every aspect of this iridology course is covered in detail. She clearly answers every question asked, no matter how trivial the student may think it is. Judith structures the classes in a way that makes them incredibly interesting. Clarification is clearly established through her instruction, discussion, and student participation. Upon completion of Judith's course, I feel very confident in my abilities and excited to offer iridology services to my clients. This course is an incredible value, highly recommended. So I'm going to lob out just an invitation right now, as just before we get into the eyes. If you are a health professional and you have an anatomy and physiology course under your belt, and you want to know more about learning iridology with me as your instructor, make a note of this URL, tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology-insight. That is your link to schedule a Zoom video call with me for us to talk about where you're at, where you want to go, and if the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course is a good fit for you. All righty. Are you ready to learn some iridology now? If that is a yes, give me a yes in the comments box. Let's learn some eye anatomy. Are you ready to learn some eye anatomy? Give me a yes if that's where you want to head next. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. Let's get going. Iridology photos are taken very, very close up. So when you see photos posted online where it shows half the face, that is not a useful iris photo. It's not going to let us see the detail we need. Because photos are taken so close up, as you see these ones on your screen are, and I'm going to move my camera closer for those of you who are with me on Instagram, you may not be able to see other facial features. You might not see the inner canthus or the outer canthus or the nose or anything else that tells you which eye you're looking at. So here's the first thing you need to know. The pupil is not centered in the iris. Can you see that? It's off center. And so there will be a narrow side of the iris and a wide side of the iris. The narrow side names the eye. So what that means is if the narrow side is to the right of the pupil, it is a right eye. If the narrow side is to the left of the pupil, it is a left eye. Can you see how that pupil is not centered? All right, so that is an important feature. If you can see clearly that that pupil is not centered, that there's a narrow side to the iris and a wide side to the iris, give me the word wide in the comments so that I know you can see that. This is a most important thing. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that you can see that. This is critically important because the right eye and the left eye, they share some information, but they also, the right eye reflects typically the right side of the body and the left eye reflects the left side of the body. And as you know, you've got different organs on the right side than you have from the left side. So we need to know accurately which eye you are looking at in order to be able to do a valid assessment. Sometimes you may have only one eye. You can still see some constitutional information, but you will also only be able to see information about organs on that particular side of the body. All right. So the next thing we want to do is look at eye anatomy in general, because we need to know all the different things we're looking at. For those of you on Instagram, I'm going to mount my phone again so I don't make you seasick with how much I wobble. All righty. What we want to be aware of, we're not going to look at everything on this diagram because it's not all critical to iridology. What we want to be aware of are things like the eye is actually, the entire eye is a nerve receptor, and it is connected directly to the brain via the optic nerve. Okay. The eyeball has two fluid-filled chambers. We have the anterior chamber and we have the posterior chamber. And we also here have the lens, which is held in place by the ciliary muscle. And we have the iris, which is anterior to the lens. So the iris actually overlaps the lens. The pupil itself, which is right here, is the aperture or the opening in the iris. Really, it's the pupil as a whole, right? So that light comes in through the cornea, through the anterior chamber, through the pupil, then the lens focuses that light on the retina. The entire eyeball is encased in a tough membrane that is made up of two parts. The largest part of this is the sclera, also known as the white of the eye. And in iridology, we actually now include the sclera because the sclera does give us information. We also, for that tough outer membrane, have the cornea, which is a clear membrane that forms a bit of a bubble at the front of the eye to create that anterior chamber and to, again, protect the lens and the iris. The optic nerve exits the back of the eyeball, and it actually splits into two nerve pathways. So each eye sends messages to its own side of the brain via one nerve pathway, but each eye also sends messages to the opposite side of the brain via a separate pathway. So again, we've got two nerve pathways from each eye. One nerve pathway goes straight back on each side, and one nerve pathway crosses over. It is that fact that we've got the two nerves, one going straight back, one crossing over, that enables us to see in 3 dimensions. And when we see in 3 dimensions, we can have depth of field then. We can assess depth of field. Where the nerve pathways cross over in the brain, where they literally cross over, make an X, is called the optic chiasm. Now we're going to get a little bit more technical. We're going to take this image and flip it on its side. Okay, so you can see we're still looking at the same eyeball. Now I've done this because we're going to go one layer deeper, and I want to show you exactly what we're going to look at. The next diagram we're going to look at is going to be a schematic diagram of this part of the iris right here. So on the next diagram, we are going to see only this. Where the diagram ends is where the pupil will begin, and where it ends on the left-hand side is where the white of the eye will begin. Okay, so we look at this. And again, for those of you on Instagram, I'm going to put my camera back on its stand. There we go. So we have the pupil over here. We have the iris, and then we have the sclera, or the white of the eye. As we go through the layers that we are looking at in the iris, this is the front-facing side up here. This is the side the world sees. This is the side of the iris that faces into that posterior chamber. So this frontmost layer is called the anterior border layer. It's actually behind the cornea. So we have the cornea here, not on the diagram, but it would be up here. And then this would be the anterior chamber. Then we have the anterior border layer. Does that make sense? Are you understanding those layers? If you are, give me an understand in the comments box. This anterior border layer is where the pigment is held. Now, if you've got a blue eye, you have very little pigment. So there'll be almost no pigment at all in that anterior border layer. If you have a brown eye, you have a lot of pigment. So there will be a lot of pigment held in this anterior border layer. That's going to be really important because when we have no pigment, we see fiber structure. When we have lots of pigment, we see very little fiber structure. The next area we want to look at, and it's not labeled here, is everything between the anterior border layer and the posterior epithelium. This is the bulk of the iris tissue. It is collectively called the stroma. In the stroma, we have muscles, we have blood vessels, and we have nerves. So there's a lot of activity in this stroma. And of course, this stroma is millimeters thick. It is not very thick at all. We have the posterior membrane, which is also known as the dilator muscle, right here. This is the muscle that it actually attaches to the edge of the sphincter muscle. And when this dilator muscle contracts, it pulls the eye open. Okay. And when the sphincter muscle contracts, it's a donut-shaped muscle that encircles the entire pupil. When the sphincter muscle contracts, it closes down that pupillary opening. We have the pigment ruff here and this posterior epithelium. These cells are extremely light sensitive, particularly at the inner edge of the iris. And it's these cells then that send the messages to the brain that tell the dilator muscle to dilate, or that tell the sphincter muscle to constrict. The posterior epithelium, you'll notice, is drawn very specifically. It is drawn as two specific layers of cells because it is exactly and precisely 2 cell layers thick. It is very dark, dark brown or black. And so again, this is the light sensitive layer, and as it wraps around that inner pupillary border, this is where the light sensing goes on to tell the muscles whether they are, how they are contracting and how that's going to affect the pupillary opening. When we have certain markings in the iris, there is sometimes a very deep separation in the layers of the stroma. And the separation in the stroma can be so deep, like looking in a crevasse on a mountain. If you've ever gone mountain climbing and you've seen a crevasse and you've looked down, it looks bottomless. When we have a deep enough separation in these iris fibers, we actually see through to this black layer. All right, so let's have a look at some eyeballs. You can see with this blue eye, we can see that we've got layers. Remember, with the iris, we actually have layers of fiber structure in here. And when we look at an iris and we see a marking like this, where we've got some shading in here, this tells us the top layer is what has the separation. And what we're looking at here is structure that is down a layer, or 2 or 3, depending on how shaded that is. We can look at an eye that is a mixed eye or a biliary eye, and what we see here again is we can actually see the individual fibers still, but we also have these separations that are allowing us to look deeper into the structure of the eye. The darker it is in those separations or those openings, the deeper we are looking, the more layers of fiber are separated. When we're looking at a true brown eye, we see very little and usually no fiber definition. If we see this kind of a thing, this again is separation between the fibers, but there's so much pigment here, we cannot see the individual fibers. When we see this kind of a haze, this is actually in the cornea. This is not in the iris. So we're looking again at layers of the eyeball. We've talked a lot about the muscles and how we've got a dilator muscle and a sphincter muscle. And so as we are looking at this, again, we talked about the sphincter muscle goes around, and when it contracts, it actually contracts in on itself, which makes the iris smaller. That sphincter muscle is anchored to the edge of the dilator muscle, and the dilator muscle is anchored to the sclera. So when the sphincter muscle contracts and makes the pupil smaller, it stretches out the fibers of the dilator muscle. Right, so that's what would happen in bright light. When we have dim light, the dilator muscle contracts, and because it is anchored onto the edge of the sphincter muscle, it pulls on the sphincter muscle, which opens up the sphincter muscle and thereby opens up the pupil. Does that make sense? If it makes sense, give me muscle in the comments box. And I love that some of you are posting these comments to let me know that this is working for you. Whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, or live on the webinar with me, play with me in my sandbox. Let me know this is working for you. Or let me know that you've got a question if there's something that I've explained that didn't land straight for you. What we know is the iris contains some 28,000 nerve endings. We just don't know what all of them do yet. Haven't got that figured out. When we are looking at an eye and we're looking for the constrictor muscle particularly, can you see on this eye that there is an edge right here where we have a slight change in texture and in color from this part of the iris to everything else? Can you see that edge? If you can see that edge, give me the word edge in the comments. This is specifically the sphincter muscle. That is the sphincter muscle. Your dilator muscle goes from the limbus right up to the edge of the sphincter muscle. So when that dilator muscle constricts, it's going to compress this part of the eye, the iris, which is going to stretch out the sphincter muscle a little bit and open up the pupil. When the sphincter muscle constricts, it's going to make the pupil smaller. That is going to pull on the dilator muscle, and it's going to stretch out this part of the iris, everything out here. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for letting me know that you could see that. That's great. The iris has circulation. And when we are looking at the iris, we need to know that the circulation in the iris is very similar to the circulation in the rest of the body. And that is that circulation that is moving away from the heart is always your oxygen-rich blood. Circulation that is moving back to the heart is always your oxygen poor blood. In the iris, what that means is that the oxygen-rich blood comes from the edge, either the outer limbus or the inner limbus, and it moves towards this ring that we call the collarette. So that is your oxygen-rich or your arterial blood. And this diagram is not quite accurate. This blood, this capillary, then attaches to the collarette, and at some point, it comes back off the collarette and goes back to the limbus. And when it goes back to the limbus, it is now venous blood. The mirror image of that happens inside this zone, where the oxygen-rich blood originates at the inner pupillary border. Those blood vessels, those capillaries come and connect to the collarette, and then they split off again to come back to the inner pupillary border. And so we've got arterial blood going towards the collarette and venous blood coming back towards the inner pupillary border. So of course, when we're talking about iridology, the iris is the focus of iridology, but we do include sclerology with it. With constitutional iridology, we study patterns of fiber structure, base color, surface pigment to assess inherited predispositions. Constitutional iridologists never do an iris analysis without background information. So we don't take a picture of an eye and tell everybody every marking we see and give them a long shopping list of everything it could mean, and then a long shopping list of everything they could possibly do about it, because not everything we see is going to be relevant to what our client needs now, and may not ever be relevant depending on what our client is actively doing for their health. Iridology is not a party game. It is not a crystal ball. We need to have a conversation with our client in order to do justice with this. So let's look at an eye. We only have one eye for this client, but it gives us the information I need for what we're going to do today. This is a female client in her mid-30s. She came to me with fertility issues. She'd been trying to get pregnant for the last couple of years. She had conceived once, and then she'd had a miscarriage. So she was hoping to avoid having another miscarriage. As you look at her eye, can you see we have layers? We have the top layer in this beautiful brown eye that has all of the pigment on it. As we look, we see there are openings in the surface, and those openings have different amounts of shades of gray or black. So black means it's deeper. Not quite as black means it's not quite as deep. Notice also that we have the collarette that appears to have been laid on the surface of the eye, kind of thick and yarn-like. Now, this eye in particular suggests that there might be a personal or family history of the MTHFR defect. This is one of the reasons why it's absolutely critical that iridologists have a solid foundation in anatomy and physiology, because it's not just about looking at signs and saying, oh, this sign is in the liver, this sign is in the kidneys, this sign is in the pancreas. It's about understanding how the markers give us information about what the client is experiencing now, so that we then understand how best to address the situation. This client, if she does have MTHFR, would certainly make it more difficult for her to get pregnant. And the MTHFR defect also would suggest that there could be liver inefficiencies. The fact that she has brown eyes suggests that there may be a predisposition towards liver inefficiencies. We also, when we blow this image up, we see she has contraction furrows. And these may also add a layer of information to help us understand why she was having problems getting pregnant. Now, contraction furrows don't always mean fertility issues. They give us more information that teach us why she might have fertility issues. There's also a slight cloudiness over the outer edge of her eye. That also suggests that there could be a predisposition towards liver enzyme insufficiencies and carbohydrate metabolism. So that makes me want to ask her, does she crave carbs? And actually, I did ask her that. And she said, yes, she did, but she was working on cleaning that up. We don't need to actually assess every single marker we see every time we see the client. These markers are not going to go away. They're not going to disappear. This is her genetics. And so we just simply need to ascertain which of these marks give us information about what our client has asked for help with. How do these marks work together? Right. And that is what we need to do. That is what an assessment is. An assessment is not listing long lists of markers and what they could mean. An assessment is understanding how the markers work together along with her symptoms to understand where we need to go from there. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, give me a makes sense in the comments box. In focusing on what our client has asked for help with, we avoid overwhelming our client. What I have learned in my 4 decades of being a wellness professional is that an overwhelmed client doesn't take action. So using iridology, we are able to keep our programs very focused and very targeted and very doable so that our clients can take action, so they can see results. And as they implement those things we've recommended, and as those things become lifestyle, we can gradually add more things to their program, right? Because if it's become lifestyle, it's no longer onerous, it's no longer a big change. So we can continue to craft and shape their program. So if you're curious about this style of iridology, and if you think, I'd like to know more, and again, if you're a health professional and you've already got anatomy and physiology under your belt, then we should have a talk. The next course start date is January 12th. Here's the thing. I only accept 10 students in each course, right? It's critical to me because I teach this course via live webinar. It's critical to me that I keep my groups small enough that every student can get every question answered, and so that I have enough time to mentor them in whatever ways they need mentoring to be successful. So if you think this course would be a good fit for you, I'm going to give you that link again in just a moment, and you can look at scheduling a Zoom call to speak with me about the course, about what's involved, about the enrollment process and all of that. Again, this is what the course is. It's the only live online fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, naturopaths, NDs, RMs, MDs, RNs, everybody who's got that health background and has anatomy and physiology under their belt. Here's what's delivered. In the scope of the class, we have 20 live 2.25 long webinar classes. Each class is recorded for playback on demand. So if you have to miss a class, no big deal, you can catch up. And they are live because they are interactive. I want my students to have conversations with me. I want them to ask questions. I want them to contribute. And I also give little oral quizzes all the way through each lesson to make sure things are landing well. We have live group mentoring twice each month via a webinar. So we have 2 regularly scheduled webinars that are specifically for extra mentoring. You've got questions, maybe you're working with a client and you were able to get photos of their eyes and you'd like some help assessing those eyes and creating a program. That's exactly what these mentoring sessions are for. We also have a student and alumni MeWe group. If you're familiar with social media, MeWe is a newer platform, and we've moved our student and alumni MeWe group to MeWe because MeWe doesn't censor what we say about health. This is a place where you'll notice it says alumni. As long as you're a nice person, you're not going to get kicked out of this group. This is another place where you can get ongoing mentoring and support and be engaged in a community. You also, as a gift in the course, receive a 225-page digital textbook that has the complete curriculum that you need. And I give each of my students permission to print up a copy of it if they prefer a hard copy book. I update the textbook as needed. As new research comes out, or if IPA tweaks the curriculum, I update the digital book, and all of my students, current and past, get access to the new book without having to pay for it. I don't know anybody else that actually gives away their textbook to their students. Everyone else that I know charges for their textbooks. Also, as a gift, I have compiled 45 pages of what we call cheat sheets. They are charts and tables that bring the curriculum down into a very point form basis. And that's meant to be a quick reference guide for when you're studying or when you're working with your clients. That's my gift as well. I also include, for my students who are interested, 10 months, for 10 months after you complete your coursework with me, I include mentoring for your IPA certification. So if you want to sit for the IPA exam, the exam fee is separate, that's paid to IPA, but I will give you up to 10 months of mentoring time to help you prepare for that exam, to make sure you are absolutely ready for it. I will provide all the materials you need according to IPA to be mentored and prepare for the exam. And when we talk, I can describe that exam process for you. So I would love to know, for those of you who are looking for an iridology course, which of those features gets you the most excited? Seriously, let me know. Is it the live classes? Is it the ongoing mentoring? Because you never get kicked out of mentoring either, even once you've graduated. Is it that you never have to buy another textbook? What is it that gets you excited about this? Again, early registration is open, and you can go ahead and book calls according to the schedules that you see on here, but you can book those calls anytime. Remember, when we get the 10 students enrolled in the course, enrollment will be closed, and you'll have to wait for the next time we offer this. So tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology-insight. So if you're a health professional, if you've already got your anatomy and physiology under your belt, and you're ready to learn iridology seriously at a professional level, if you think this course is a good fit for you, then schedule a call and let's have a conversation. If this is not a good fit, if I can see that this is not going to be the right thing for you, I will certainly coach you in a different direction. I only teach health professionals. I do not take the general public. Okay. All righty. And so with that, are there any questions? On Facebook, Mary is saying, Judith is an amazing teacher and a dedicated mentor. I highly recommend her course. Thank you so much for that, Mary. I really appreciate that. Mary and I have known each other many, many years. Many years. All righty. I don't think I'm seeing any questions come in. Again, I encourage you to make use of this link if you would like to have a private conversation about the course to see if it is a good fit for you. And with that, my friends, I hope you have an amazing day. And again, if you're in the States, I hope you have a fabulous Thanksgiving. For everybody else, I just hope you have a wonderful day. And I will talk to you very soon. I look forward to speaking with you on a Zoom call. Hey there, how was that? I'd love it if you'd leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of it. While you're doing that, Remember to subscribe to this channel, to like the video, and to share it with a friend. See you later. Bye for now.